You're listening to Shift, Human First Financial Guidance with Ross Marino.
Today, we are shifting the conversation with Dr. Phil Pearlman. Hey there.
Hey, Ross, how are you, man? Good to talk to you.
So glad to have you on the show. I have binge read your newsletters. I followed some media, watched some interviews. You got a great history. Before we dive in and start talking about what you're working on now, how about a good 60 seconds? Here's where I've been. Here's how I got to where I am today.
Very quickly, when I was a kid, I was an athlete, and that's foreshadow. I went to graduate school and became a psychologist. So I am a doctor of psychology. I went and worked at a hedge fund and helped launch that back in the day. It was behaviorally focused. Then I went and helped found StockTwits and invested and started making investments in social media startups. Then I went to Yahoo Finance and helped them build Tumblr Network after they bought Tumblr. Then I went to a bank and helped them develop their digital media, a publicly traded bank called Bank OZK. Used to be called Bank of the Ozarks. Some people will remember him as that.
Sure.
Then I went to Osprey Funds and was their chief marketing officer and chief behavioral officer. And I recently resigned my position there and have started my own endeavor called the Pearl Institute, focused on personal health planning and the parallel between health and wealth planning. That's what I'm doing now. And that is a passion play on my part. And I'm just really excited to be focusing on that. I went through my own health journey. Did my own survey and long-term planning for myself and got my own act together, got fit. And now I want to share that and help to inspire fitness across our population, and really focusing in on the advisor community because there's so many similarities between health and wealth planning.
So when I look at your resume, it's way longer, of course, and impressive than you described. So I appreciate the cliff notes, but I looked down the list and thought, well, that's cool. Oh, that's kind of cool. Hey, that's neat. But I'll tell you what jumped out at me. You were a chief behavioral strategist before I started seeing that title. So now we're seeing it more and more, and many firms are trying to shift the conversation to human first financial guidance. But you were a chief behavioral strategist a few years ago. What was it like in the early years when you had this title that I'd imagine a lot of people weren't even sure what you did?
Well, here's the thing. I came at behavioral finance and behavioral economics from the psychology angle. So most people go into finance, they begin learning about it and they learn. But really, Kahneman and Tversky were social psychologists, and they were decision theorists, right? And that is a branch of social psychology. And they were actually psychologists in the Israeli army working, or Israeli Air Force, working with fighter pilots and their decision making. I'm going way back in their history, way before Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in economics. So that's where they were coming. So this is really behavioral economics is an integration of economics and social psychology. And so I was coming from the psychology end because that's what I got my degree in. And what I found was that simply pointing out the thinking and behavioral problems that we all have around money that are instinctual and biological, right? That we all have these tendencies to make the same types of mistakes, and they're universal. And that's why so many people relate to them, right? Pointing them out from a descriptive point of view is one thing. Promoting change prescriptive, not descriptive, is really another. And so with my background, I had a background in understanding how people change, processes of change. There's a whole science to that within the clinical psychology realm. So that was really the thing to me that made me really, really interested in this stuff. I was always interested in markets. And then when I discovered that there was a psychology of markets, I was like, wow, it's like a fish to water. But to me, the key is, I mean, everybody has, something about anything that they do that really resonates. To me, the thing that resonated was this idea of promoting rational change or adaptive change. And that's what I'm actually focused on now, as well. But that was the thing for me. And that, I think, is really where the rubber hits the road, because we all, by now, and probably 95% of the advisors watching this have some knowledge of behavioral economics, and they understand what the biases are, and they've heard of all that stuff, and they know what confirmation bias is in a very surfacey way. But to get down under that and to think about how we can make changes to ourselves and to our behavior, and also to our clients' behavior, I mean, and that's really the thing that excites me about this whole field.
And financial knowledge is required, table stakes, no doubt. But if you're really going to help people make decisions and affect change, we have to understand the human side. And I love that it's being talked about more and more. Your newsletter, chock full of goodies in there. I just retweeted one of them. I love the first line off of it. It says, "There's only one true benchmark, and it's staring us in the mirror." Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we can only compare ourselves to ourselves. And every other comparison that we ever make is a false comparison. If we're comparing ourselves to our neighbors, if we're comparing ourselves to somebody on Instagram that looks like they have such an incredible life, if we're comparing ourselves to our siblings, sibling rivalry exists for, that saying exists for a reason, right? All of those are false benchmarks, because we all are individuals, and we all have our own story, and we all have our own lives, and none of them are the same as our neighbor or our siblings or the people on Instagram or anybody else. And as long as we are improving, as long as we are getting a little, even if it's just incremental, even if it's just a 3 yards in a cloud of dust, as they say in football, a year, that is the right direction. Because not going anywhere or going in the wrong direction is really sort of a quality of our society that we live in, that we're all a part of. We're all a part of this culture that has a lot of problems, and there's a toxicity to our culture. There's a lot of negativity out there. I was reading the other day that negative headlines are skyrocketing, and there's a lot of ill health, a lot of metabolic ill health, a lot of severe obesity and other types of health problems that are lifestyle, that are really a part of our culture. And so going against that trend is a subversive act these days. So getting healthy, or, and saving money is the same thing, right? Diligently, patiently putting money away and not getting caught up in in the zeitgeist when everybody's bullish or whatever. As a matter of fact, there was a quote from JP Morgan. I don't remember the exact quote, but he said something about how, nothing is more disruptive to a person than seeing his neighbor get rich, And the thing about that quote is that I don't buy it. I don't buy it. JP Morgan was an egomaniac.
Right.
Was he brilliant? Yes. But he was difficult to work with. He was an egotist. And that was his framework. His benchmark was the other people out there who were the captains of industry, right? The other very wealthy people getting wealthier. And so if he saw one of them have something more or better than he did, that's how he reacted. And just because it's a quote doesn't mean we have to go nodding our heads thoughtlessly and saying, hey, it's true. We can say, no, you know what? that may have been true for him. He was a narcissist. It's not necessarily true for me. I can be my own benchmark. So I have a mirror right here. I look in the mirror and I say, okay, what can I do for myself? Where I'm at now, who I am, whether it's my physical, mental, spiritual health, or whether it's my bank account and the money that I'm saving for the future. So I am my only true benchmark. That is that's a strong current in my own journey and in my thinking.
I think personally, I've experienced that. It's that I think I got it from Strategic Coach originally years ago when they talked about progress versus perfection, and perfection being the horizon. And no matter how fast you walk or how far you walk, the horizon's out there. It's unreachable. But what matters is progress. And when that gets into you as a business owner, as a parent, as a person, it really does shift your thinking. And we've got clients, of course, that we're working with. They're looking at numbers, they're looking at statements, they're looking at their neighbors, or they're looking at peers. And that's certainly going to be something that they bring up. Clients often lead with financial questions or financial situations they're facing. And as advisors, we need to sometimes shift that conversation to something that's more relevant or that gets to why. And I know you have a few areas that you're really putting emphasis on right now. What are some ways for advisors to shift the conversation, and where do you think we should go before we try to dive into all the numbers?
I think one of the things that we can do is we can acknowledge what they're saying, hear what they're saying, and then to give them constructive feedback on who they are and where they've come from. Say, yeah, I know that you may. Here's the thing. If you're keeping up with the Joneses, even if you surpass the Joneses, it's never enough. It's like a cup with a hole in it. You put water in the cup and the hole drains the water out, and then you have to pour more water in. So if you're trying to keep up with the Joneses, you will never fill that cup. There will always be that hole. And so by acknowledging where they're at, number one, and then if they have made some progress with the man in the mirror over time, let's say last year they were sitting at, X assets, and now they're sitting at X plus one assets. That's something that we can point out to them. And really what that is, and you hear behavioral economists and you hear some advisors even talking about this, that is a reframing. You're experientially reframing it. You're saying, you're pointing out, and they look at you as an authority in the area of money. And so if you're helping them to reframe it, and you're saying to them, hey, I noticed that last year you had this much and this year you had that much, and you're moving in the right direction. You're continuing with your plan. You have a long-term plan. You're really doing this. You're 1 year closer, or whatever it is. Maybe it's a 529 or whatever that is. Just by pointing it out to them that you're noticing that and giving them credit for it as that figure of, well, he's the person who knows, or she's the person who knows this stuff, that they hear that and they take it in. That, to me, it's a validation, it's empathic, and it's a frame for them that is a more constructive frame than the back of my head. The Joneses just bought a Tesla or a fancy car or whatever.
And in this environment right now, at the time of recording, we're in a bear market.
Right.
Lots of fear, lots of anxiety for people out there. If we do what you're suggesting, that really shifts the conversation, where when they show progress, it sounds like we'll be able to be grateful for, here's where we were and here's where we've come. How important is it to experience gratitude, be grateful, and how much of an attack on anxiety is that?
Gratitude is magical, and sharing joy is magical. Mindfulness is magical. Sleep is magical. There are things that we don't fully understand why, but we know that they are constructive, life-affirming, positive. And so If we touch on any one of those, and in this case, we're talking about being grateful for the things that we do have, that in and of itself, just by virtue of what it is, do we understand exactly why? Listen, I'm a shrink. I don't understand why. I don't. But we know that it's natural law. We know that it's just a human thing, that gratitude is a positive experience. Joy for ourselves and our family and others is a positive experience. Walking and thinking or meditating is a positive experience, and it builds on that positivity. So gratitude, for whatever reason, is a super positive experience that will help to de-escalate anxiety, worry, negative affect, negative mood of any kind. So I can't recommend it enough, even if I don't understand it completely. Glad you asked about that. It's super powerful, and it's multiple levers there. It's not just gratitude. There's more to it than that. There is, spiritual well-being and physical well-being and mood. All of those things affect our experience of life and what we're heading towards.
Now, how does this relate to the most boring superpower ever? That was one of your great newsletter articles.
The most boring superpower ever. What was it again? I don't even remember what it was. Once you say it, I'll remember.
I saw the title and I wrote it down. I'm like, oh, I got to ask him about this.
Well, here's the thing. No. I know what it is. Here's the thing about it.
Okay.
There are a few. Okay. Here's the thing. I'm gonna give this a broader brush than I did in writing. Here's the thing. Thriving and being healthy and being responsible with our money and saving and planning is nothing. None of those things are complicated things. They are all boring. They're all boring. And walking is you think of it and you're like, walking, really? Really, Phil? Is that what you're going to tell me? You're not going to tell me some, sexy exercise or yoga pose that's some shit, right? No, I'm not. There's not an end. There's a ton of people out there selling stuff. And they're like, oh, I have this fancy schmancy thing and I have a great name for it. And it's spirulina or some other concoction. There's a million there's a superfood. Every month there's a new superfood. All of that is BS. The real superpowers are the most boring things in the world, right? So it is taking a walk. It is getting a good, eating real food. It is spending time with your family. It is putting money away, like religiously every month, even if it's just a small amount. It is living below your means. It is all of these things that are boring things that we discount or take for granted because they're not sexy and they're not a convertible or whatever whatever your thing is. And that is really the larger point of that concept, is that the real superpowers are incredibly boring things. I mean, putting money into a low fee, broad market ETF every quarter for the rest of your life and not having to think about the market at all, or what energy stocks are doing, or SaaS stocks, or whatever the hot new toy is, or chasing or doing anything else, it's boring. But that's where the wisdom is. So really, I was talking about, I think I was talking about walking, but really it's that there's multiple. All of the best superpowers are all really kind of boring.
And as I hear you describe it, it's not just that they're boring. I certainly get that, but it also sounds like they are all accessible. You don't have to have your doctorate in psychology. You don't have to be a financial wizard. You don't have to meditate for 2 hours every day. These are things that if you add them to your routine, to your lifestyle, they're simple, they're accessible, but they're actually superpowers.
Exactly. as a matter of fact, funny quick story about meditating. I never could meditate. Like I never, I'm a little ADHD and I just never got it. Pay attention to your breathing and sit quietly. And I just couldn't. And I never really got it. And then I was reading something one day where someone said, I think it was Philip Glass, the composer. He's a Buddhist, and he said something, and it was like unrelated, but he said something about meditating. He was like, meditating. Oh, he was quoting somebody else, and he was like, meditating is just paying attention, And then once he said that, it completely clicked with me, and I realized that I meditate when I walk, because I just walk and kind of think about things. And then I got back from a walk and I Googled walking meditation. And I found out that there's a whole thing about walking meditation. Yeah. It's a whole thing in and of itself. And I was like, okay, and now I get it. And it was it was just going for a walk is really all there is. All that is, maybe turning your phone off and going for a walk. That's it. So yeah, it's really all simple stuff. You don't have to do, you don't have to be able to do, to bench press 300 pounds or squat 300 pounds or deadlift 500 pounds. None of that stuff. Just really, a little patience and putting money away incrementally over a long period of time, and walking and eating real foods, and, making sure you get some sleep. And that's really all there is to, all there is to the long-term wisdom.
I remember years ago trying meditation for the first time, and it was a 3-minute session that I was supposed to meditate. And, full disclosure, it was the most agonizing hour of my life, right? It was torture. It seemed like the hardest thing in the world, but as I studied it and I learned more about it, it really is about being present, but the effects of it, the benefits of it, there's so much science behind it. The more you look into it, to be present, it impacts all areas of your life. It's, you mentioned it as a superpower. A lot of people believe that's one of the superpowers out there. How about one last thing? You mentioned Groundhog Day Bias. That was one of your older newsletters. Do you remember what that was?
Yes. So this one's actually really, really important for the advisor community. Okay. So there is this concept, there is this human bias. We are all present biased, right? We all think more about the present than we do the future. We feel more about the present than we do the future. We care more about the present than we do the future, to a degree that is unhealthy and unwise to our future self. And behavioral economists have a fancy term for it, discounting, some kind of discounting. I forgot the fancy term, but it was some kind of, if you look on my website, I have a whole definition of it. It wasn't hedonic discount. It was something, it was whatever. And we are all present bias. And it makes total sense when you think about it, because we're here in the present. Sure. So we're feeling the present, right? Somebody puts a piece of cake in front of me and I'm like, wow, that's my carrot cake is my favorite cake. It's a big piece. There's a fork. I'm going to eat it right now. And I'm not going to think about myself in 30 years and how that may affect my health span and my lifespan and how I feel in the future. And then guess what? Tomorrow, put that same cake ahead of me. Tomorrow will become today in 24 hours. So let's skip ahead 24 hours and you put the cake in front of me again. And I say, oh man, that's my favorite cake. Give me a fork. I'm going to eat it. And I'm not going to think about it. So we are always present biased. And that is the Groundhog Day bias, right? We're always thinking about this moment. So when Bill Murray is in the cafe and he doesn't care, he doesn't give a what, and he's stuffing his face with pies right in front of the woman that he really has a crush on, he doesn't care because he knows he's going to live that same day again tomorrow. And so I'm really just playing on the movie there. And there's a cure for Groundhog Day bias. We all have that. We have it when it comes to money, and we have it when it comes to health. And as a matter of fact, the future curve of how we care about money, it's proven. It's been evident. There's an evidence basis to it, that you go out just a little ways in the future, and how much we care about what happens then just falls off a table. It's like the curve is like this. It's like what do you call that when futures
Discounting.
it's contango.
Yeah.
Commodity traders out there. The way we think about the futures in contango all the time, we value the future much lower than we value the present. So there's a cure for that, though, and here's the cure. And this is good stuff. This is what I was talking about before, being prescriptive, not descriptive. So there's a way to raise the value we put on the future, and that is by connecting our heart to it, connecting our emotions to it. And we can connect our emotions to it by visualizing that future vividly. So this is something that we can do whether we're talking about money in the advisor space or whether we're talking about health planning. So whether we're talking about wealth planning or health planning. And that is visualize that future you in great detail. How do I look? How do I feel? What am I wearing? Who am I with? What do I love to do? What are my greatest priorities? Maybe it's seeing my grandchildren who don't even exist yet get married, or that's what it is with me. That's the thing with me. But visualize that vividly, write it out, and keep it with you. Come back to it frequently, because what that does is that creates the emotional resonance into that thing in the future. Because really what we're doing is we're devaluing or not valuing our future emotion. So you can do this also with wealth planning. And I know that some planners do that. Hey, it's my planner with me did it with the beach house. Hey, Phil and Michelle, what do you guys really, really want? And we were like, well, we're going to do the beach house. We're going to have a beach house. We'll have the kids there. We'll have the grandkids there. Okay. Imagine that, so I went and imagined that really, really vividly. So that is the Groundhog Day bias, that we repeat those same mistakes over and over again, because tomorrow becomes the present and we're present biased. And then it becomes the present again 2 days from now. Every day is going to happen. That 35 years from now is going to happen. That's going to become the present just as much as today is. You know what I mean? So that's the Groundhog Day bias. And then the cure is to connect to it emotionally through visualization or any other way that you can really connect to it, and to keep it with you. Bring it up often. I think of it, I look at it or think of it almost, well, not daily, but weekly, and certainly by months. I think about, what I want to be doing when my grandkids are getting married, and how I want to be living and what I want to be doing.
How can people find you on social media and learn more about the Institute?
The Pearl Institute, you can Google that, or just go to pearlinst.com, pearlinst.com. Really, the way to keep track of me is on Twitter, at P Pearlman, PPEARLMAN, on Twitter, and I'm there often. My newsletter is called Prime Cuts. It's at primecuts.substack.com. I write there weekly. You can email me at ppearlman@gmail.com, PPEARLMAN@gmail.com. I think I've exhausted all the ways to get a hold of me there.
That's it. Dr. Phil Pearlman, thanks for being on the show today and helping us shift the conversation.
My pleasure. And thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Shift with Ross Marino. Please visit humanfirst.live to learn more. This show is for general information purposes only and is not intended to provide recommendations or advice. Speak with a legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions. Past performance references are historical and do not guarantee future results.